Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the console as the alert klaxons blared, her fingers flying across the holographic display. "Evasive maneuvers now," she barked, eyes locked on the incoming signatures. 3 Kalith cruisers, sleek predators cutting through the asteroid field like knives through silk. The bridge of the UNS Resolve shuddered under the strain of the thrusters firing at maximum. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, a wiry man with a perpetual squint from years staring at star charts, punched in the coordinates without a word. He was the cautious one, always double-checking trajectories, but today there was no time for that. "They're matching our vector, Captain. Point-blank range in 30 seconds. Elena nodded, her jaw set. The Kalith had been shadowing their convoy for weeks. Those arrogant insectoids with their hive-mind tactics and energy lances that could slice a frigate in half. But this ambush felt too precise, too coordinated, like they'd been herded right into it. She glanced at the third member of their core team, Dr. Lena Ortiz. The engineer hunched over her toolkit in the corner, her dark hair tied back in a practical knot. Lena was the witty one, quick with a quip to cut tension, but her hands trembled slightly now as she patched a flickering panel. "Shields at 80%, Marcus reported, his voice steady but edged with strain. "They're deploying drones, swarm pattern, classic Kalith feint." Elena leaned forward, scanning the tactical overlay. The asteroids loomed like silent giants, their jagged surfaces glinting in the distant sun. If they could use the field to their advantage. Hale plot a slingshot around that big rocket bearing 240. Ortiz, reroute auxiliary power to the forward emitters. "We're not running, we're turning the tables." Lena looked up, a spark of her usual fire returning. "Turning the tables? With what, our winning smiles? These lances will melt us before we blink." "Just do it," Elena snapped. Though a grim smile tugged at her lips, the ship groaned as it banked hard, gravity compensators whining. Outside, the first drone salvo lit up the void, plasma trails streaking like angry hornets. The Resolve clipped the edge of an asteroid, sparks erupting from the hull where debris pinged off the shields. Marcus swore under his breath. "Impact imminent, they're firing." Elena braced as the energy lance grazed them, the ship bucking violently. Consoles sparked, and a panel burst open near Lena, showering her with acrid smoke. She coughed, waving it away, but kept working, her fingers a blur on the exposed wiring. "Shields down to 40, Marcus said, his squint deepening. "Captain, we can't take another hit." The Kalith cruisers closed in, their chitinous hulls pulsing with bioluminescent veins, broadcasting their smug certainty across open channels. They thought they had the humans pinned, predictable prey scattering in panic. But Elena saw the gap, the drones clustering too tightly, the cruisers overcommitted to the chase. "Ortiz now," Elena ordered. With a triumphant grunt, Lena slammed the panel shut. Emitters hot, firing improvised pulse. A burst of modulated energy erupted from the Resolve's bow. Not a weapon, but a jury-rigged disruptor wave, scavenged from their mining lasers. It rippled through the drone swarm, short-circuiting their guidance in a cascade of explosions. The lead Kalith cruiser veered wildly, its formation shattering as confusion rippled through their link. Marcus whooped, a rare crack in his caution. "Direct hit on their comms array, they're blind." Elena allowed herself a breath, watching the cruisers falter. But the victory was fleeting. One lance still lanced out, carving a gash along their flank. Alarms wailed anew, hull breach in engineering. "Damage report," she demanded, already moving toward the hatch. Lena wiped sweat from her brow, her wit subdued. "We're venting atmosphere. If we don't seal it, we're done." As the Resolve limped deeper into the field, Elena knew this was just the opening salvo. The Kalith believed they were the hunters, but humanity had been laying breadcrumbs for months. The real trap was closing, and they were walking right into it. Elena gripped the railing as the Resolve shuddered, the deck plates vibrating under her boots like a beast fighting for breath. Smoke curled from the engineering access hatch ahead, acrid and biting, carrying the tang of scorched wiring. She yanked it open, the metal hot enough to sear her glove. Inside, chaos reigned. Lena crouched amid sparking consoles, her hands a blur as she slapped sealant foam over a jagged tear in the bulkhead. Atmosphere hissed out in thin wisps, the void beyond claiming every molecule it could. Marcus hovered nearby, his face pale under the emergency lights, holding a portable welder like it was a lifeline. "Status," Elena barked, dropping to one knee beside them. No time for niceties. The Kalith cruisers were regrouping, their silhouettes sharpening in the debris field on the view screen behind. Lena didn't look up, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. Breach is contained for now, manual seals holding. But the warp coil's misaligned. One more hit like that and we're drifting scrap. Marcus clipped the welder to his belt, his cautious eyes flicking to the readouts. Shield's at 30%. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they pin us down. Elena, we need to pull back. She shook her head, mind racing through the trap's geometry. The asteroid field they'd lured the Caliph into was laced with human minds. Silent sentinels, dormant until triggered. But the breach had thrown their timing off. If they retreated now, the aliens would scatter, and months of feints and false signals would unravel. No, Elena said, pulling up a holographic map on her wrist display. The projection flickered, casting blue ghosts across their faces. We push forward. Lena, can you reroute auxiliary power to the maneuvering thrusters? Buy us some distance. Lena paused, wiping grime from her cheek with the back of her hand, a spark of her usual wit flickering back. Reroute? Sure, if you want the lights dim and the coffee cold. But yeah, I can do it. Give me 2 minutes. Marcus leaned in, his voice low and urgent. Captain, that's suicide. Their lance fire punched through us like paper. We're 1 ship against 3. Elena's jaw tightened. She remembered the briefings back on Earth. Endless simulations of Caliph tactics, their hive mind precision making them seem invincible. But humans didn't fight fair. They adapted, they improvised. They're blind without comms, Marcus, disoriented, we use that. Thread the needle through the inner cluster, trigger the mines on our tail. He hesitated, then nodded, the caution in his eyes hardening into resolve. Copy. I'll take the helm. As Marcus dashed for the bridge, Elena helped Lena with the reroute, their hands brushing cables in the dim glow. The ship groaned, a deep metallic protest as power surged unevenly. Alarms blared again, proximity warning. The Caliph were closing, their formation fracturing but relentless, energy lances probing the field like fingers in the dark. Got it, Lena announced, slamming a panel shut. The hissing stopped. The air stabilized, cool recyclers kicking in with a familiar hum. Thrusters hot. But don't ask for miracles, we're running on spit and prayers. Elena clapped her shoulder, then sprinted after Marcus. The bridge was a hive of red alerts, the view screen dominating the space with its star-speckled chaos. Asteroids tumbled lazily, ancient remnants of some long-dead collision now their battlefield. Initiating evasive, Marcus called, fingers dancing over controls. The resolve lurched, thrusters flaring to weave through a narrow gap. A lance streaked past, close enough to rattle the hull, ionizing the space around them in a flash of violet. There, Elena pointed, zooming the map. A dense knot of rocks ahead primed with their hidden payload. Dive in. Let them follow. The ship banked hard, gravity compensators straining. Behind them, the Caliph cruisers mimicked the maneuver, their sleek forms cutting through the debris with eerie grace. But without their link, coordination faltered. One veered too wide, scraping an asteroid and shedding armor plates in a glittering trail. They're biting, Marcus said, a grin cracking his tension. Minds armed? Elena triggered the sequence from her console. Silent bursts rippled out, electromagnetic pulses designed to overload Caliph shields, not destroy outright. Human tech, gritty and unpolished, playing to weaknesses the aliens never saw coming. The lead cruiser lit up, systems frying in a cascade of overloads. It spun wildly, slamming into a boulder and erupting in secondary explosions. The others hesitated, probes firing blindly now, but triumph soured fast. The Resolve's damaged flank caught on a fragment, tearing fresh wounds. Sparks flew across the bridge. A console exploded in a shower of shrapnel. Impact! Marcus yelled, wrestling the controls. The ship listed, engines coughing. Elena braced against the shake, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. They'd drawn first blood, but the trap was only half sprung. The remaining Caliph were adapting, their hive mind fragments knitting back together. Lena's voice crackled over the intercom. Engineering's a mess again. We're losing pressure in the core. If we don't dock somewhere soon, this bird's grounded. Elena scanned the map, eyes landing on a faint signal. Their backup, hidden in the field's heart. Hold course. We're not done yet. Elena gripped the armrest as the Resolve shuddered through another debris field, the hull groaning like a beast in pain. Marcus's hands flew over the controls, sweat beading on his brow, his cautious nature buried under the raw need to keep them alive. Engines at 60%, he muttered, voice tight. That tear's venting plasma. We push harder, we blow. She nodded, ignoring the sting from her forehead cut, blood already crusting. The bridge lights flickered, casting long shadows over the scattered consoles. Outside the viewport, the asteroid belt loomed, a jagged maze of rock and ice, the faint signal pulsing like a heartbeat in its core. Their backup plan, a forgotten mining outpost rigged with automated defenses. If they reached it, they could regroup. If not, the Kalith remnants would pick them apart. Lena, status? Elena called into the intercom, her tone steady despite the chaos. A burst of static, then Lena's voice edged with exhaustion. Patching the core breach, but it's like plugging a sieve with spit. Give me 10 minutes or we're space dust. The engineer was all grit, her witty barbs silenced by the grind of repairs below decks. The ship lurched as a proximity alarm wailed. Marcus swore under his breath, yanking the yoke. A Kalith drone, sleek, iridescent, its hive link fractured but still hunting, darted from the shadows of a tumbling boulder. It fired a lance of energy, grazing the Resolve's shields with a sizzle. Evade! Elena barked, but Marcus was already on it, rolling the ship in a tight spiral. The drone pursued, adaptive algorithms knitting its path to their maneuvers. It wasn't the full swarm anymore. Not after their ambush scattered the hive mind, but these fragments were vicious, learning from every dodge. Shields down to 40, Marcus reported, his brave streak shining through as he lined up a countershot. The forward turrets hummed to life, spitting plasma bolts that chipped the drone's hull. It veered, trailing sparks, but looped back undeterred. Elena's mind raced. The outpost was close, 5 minutes at best, but this lone hunter could cripple them first. Divert auxiliary power to the point defense grid. Buy us time. Marcus hesitated a fraction, eyes flicking to her. That'll starve the engines. We slow down, it catches us. Do it, she said, meeting his gaze. Trust had to hold them now, not debate. He complied, fingers dancing across the panel. The ship bucked as power surged to the automated guns, a hail of fire erupting in precise bursts. The drone twisted, its form blurring with evasive bursts, but one shot pierced its core. It exploded in a silent bloom of debris, fragments pinging off the hull like lethal rain. Relief washed brief, but the Resolve listed harder, engines whining in protest. Alarms blared anew, hull integrity failing in the damage section. Lena! Elena shouted. On it, rerouting now. But Captain, that outpost signal's glitching. Interference, maybe Kalith jamming? Elena's jaw tightened. The trap they'd sprung on the swarm had cost them, drawing the hive into the belt where human minds shredded their formation. But these survivors were adapting faster than expected, their fragmented consciousnesses seeking revenge. If the signal was compromised, the outpost might be a death trap. Hold course, she repeated, though doubt gnawed. Marcus glanced her way, his caution urging a pullback, but he said nothing, just nursed the controls. The belt closed in, rocks tumbling like silent avalanches. A larger asteroid loomed ahead, its surface pitted and shadowed. The Resolve skimmed its edge, gravity tugging at the frame. Then from the darkness another drone emerged, not alone. Two more flanked it, their light sinking in a crude hive pulse. They're coordinating, Marcus said, voice low. The fragments are linking up. Elena slammed the comm. Lena, weapons online, now. Working on it, came the reply, strained. One turret's fried from the earlier hit. The lead drone fired, energy lancing through the void. It struck the weakened flank and the ship screamed, metal tearing, lights dying in cascades. Elena was thrown against her harness, the bridge plunging into red emergency glow. Marcus fought the spin, gritting his teeth. We can't take another. In that heartbeat, Elena spotted it. A narrow gap in the asteroid, a choke point the drones would have to funnel through. Human instinct, the kind that turned desperation into edge. Thread the needle, Marcus. Use the rock as cover. He saw it too, eyes widening. No time for words. He banked hard, the Resolve diving into the crevice with inches to spare. Stone-scraped hull, sparks flying inside as panels buckled. The drones followed, but the tight space forced them single file, their fire glancing off the asteroid walls. Now! Elena yelled. Marcus triggered the improvised mine, debris charges they'd seeded earlier in the trap. The explosion ripped through the gap, a chain reaction of rock and plasma that pulverized the pursuers. Chunks of drone rained down, the hive link severed in fire. The ship burst free, battered but intact, the outpost signal steadying ahead. But the cost hit home, secondary systems offline, Lena's voice silent over the comm. Elena unstrapped, steadying herself. Marcus, get us docked. Whatever's waiting, we face it together. He nodded. The ship's final push a defiant roar against the stars. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic groan, locking the ship against the outpost's scarred hull. Elena gripped the console edge, her knuckles white as the airlock cycled. Red lights pulsed in the corridor beyond, emergency protocols or worse. Marcus killed the engines, the sudden silence amplifying the hum of failing life support. Lena! Elena called into the comm, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. No response, just static laced with faint beeps from the medical bay. She'd taken a glancing hit during the drone swarm, shrapnel embedding in her shoulder. Brave as ever, Lena had waved her off, insisting on monitoring the charges. Now silence. Marcus unbuckled, grabbing his toolkit. I'll check her. You scout ahead. Outposts got eyes on us, but if the hive's infiltrated... He trailed off, eyes flicking to the viewport where asteroid shadows loomed like waiting predators. Elena nodded, slinging her pulse rifle. 10 minutes, then we regroup. No heroics. She hit the inner seal, stepping into the antechamber. The air tasted metallic, recycled too many times, and the gravity felt off. Subtle wobble from the outpost's aging stabilizers. Footprints marred the deck plating, fresh and uneven, leading toward the core. She followed them, rifle low but ready. The corridor walls bore scorch marks, remnants of some earlier skirmish. Up ahead, a bulkhead door hung ajar, emergency lights casting long shadows. Elena paused, listening. A low whine echoed. Machinery or something mimicking it? She edged closer, peering through the gap. Inside the control room, two figures hunched over a console, outpost techs or what was left of them. One twitched unnaturally, tendrils of iridescent slime coiling from his neck interfacing with the panel. The other lay slumped, eyes vacant, a data jack ripped free from his temple, hive assimilation mid-process. The console flickered with incoming signals, drones vectoring in, a trap tightening around the outpost like a noose. Elena's breath caught. They weren't just survivors here. The hive had burrowed in, turning the station into a beacon for the swarm. She backed away, thumbing her comm. Marcus, it's bad. Assimilated crew. We can't hold... A skittering sound cut her off. From the vents above, a scout drone dropped, its segmented body unfolding with a click. Smaller than the pursuers, but fast. Claws scraping as it lunged. She fired, the pulse bolt shearing off a limb. It screeched, rolling to regroup. But Elena was already moving, slamming the bulkhead shut behind her. Alarms blared. Sealing protocols engaging too late. The drone's claws raked the door, sparks flying. Marcus! She barked into the comm. Lena's bay, now. They're inside. Static crackled, then his voice. On it. Found her, stable but out cold. Rigging a breach charge for the core. Buy us time. Elena sprinted back toward the airlock, mind racing. The outpost defenses were slave to the hive now. Turrets probably locking onto their ship. Improvise. The auxiliary power relays. If she could overload them, fry the assimilation nodes without venting the whole station. She veered into a side passage, dodging a loose panel that clattered underfoot. The relay room was just ahead, door half-welded from prior damage. Elena shouldered it open, the hinges protesting. Inside, conduits snaked like veins humming with stolen energy. She dropped to her knees, prying open a junction box with her rifle's stock. Wires sparked under her gloved fingers, red for power, blue for control. No time for finesse. She yanked the blue cluster, twisting it against the red with a makeshift splice from her belt kit. A jury-rigged, short, human-style crude, but it would cascade. The lights dimmed, then flared. A shudder ran through the outpost, the whine of drones faltering in the distance. Elena wiped sweat from her brow, the acrid smell of melting insulation filling the air. It wouldn't kill the hive link entirely, but it staggered it. Bought minutes, maybe. She reactivated her comm. Relays down. Head to the core and we blow it and evac. Marcus's reply came terse. Lena's stirring. Copy that, moving. Elena rose, rifle humming back to life. The shadows seemed to retreat, but she knew better. The trap was sprung, but the real fight was just beginning. One where humanity's grit turned the jaws back on the hunters. Elena crouched behind a cluster of overturned cargo crates, her breath steady despite the pulse hammering in her temples. The corridor ahead stretched into dim haze, emergency strips flickering like dying fireflies along the walls. She could hear it now, the low hum of the hive drones rebooting, their synchronized whir closing in from the vents. Minutes. That's all the splice had bought them. She checked her rifle's charge, 3/4 full, enough for a stand if it came to that. "Marcus, status?" she whispered into the comm, keeping her voice low to avoid echoing off the metal. A pause, then his gravelly response crackled through. Lena's on her feet but shaky. Found a med patch in the locker. Stabilized the bleed. We're at the junction but the door's fused. Drones are probing the outer hull. I can feel the vibrations. Elena's mind raced. The core was 2 levels down, past the engineering bay where the aliens had nested their relay nodes. Blowing it meant cutting the outpost's power grid entirely, but it would sever the hive's anchor to this rock. No more endless reinforcements swarming from the void. She glanced at the access panel beside her, its controls smeared with the black ichor from an earlier skirmish. "Improvise. Always improvise. Hold position," she said. "I'm rerouting the subconduits from here. It'll overload the junction fuses. Give you a path." She pried open the panel with her multi-tool, sparks dancing as wires spilled out like entrails. Human engineering wasn't elegant like the xenotech. It was stubborn, layered with redundancies the hive mind couldn't predict. She twisted a blue conduit to bridge the red emergency line. Her fingers slick with sweat. The hum grew louder. Drones, 3 of them, scuttling into view at the corridor's end, their multifaceted eyes glinting under the strobing lights. "Come on," she muttered, jamming the splice home. A jolt ran up her arm, the panel scorching her glove. Alarms blared and the corridor plunged into near blackness, save for the drone's bioluminescent pulses. Marcus's voice cut in sharp. "Door's clear." Moving now, but Lena's hit. Took a graze from a shrapnel burst. Elena's gut twisted. Lena, the cautious one, always double-checking scans before a dive. Brave under fire, but this outpost had worn them all thin. "Patch it and push. I'll cover the bay entrance." She slung her rifle and bolted, boots pounding grated floor. The drone screeched, pivoting toward her shadow. One lunged, its legs clicking like shears. She fired, a tight burst that shattered its carapace, viscous fluid spraying the wall. The others flanked, forcing her into a side alcove. Trapped. Her back pressed against a coolant pipe, frost biting through her suit. "Think." The pipe hummed, chilled vapor hissing from a micro-leak. She yanked a grenade from her vest, not explosive but thermal. Human surplus designed for zero-G breaches. She primed it, rolled it under the drone's path. They paused, sensors whirring in confusion at the unfamiliar signature. The grenade popped, not with fire, but a blast of supercooled gas that flash-froze the lead drone's joints. It crumpled, locking the second in place as ice spread across the floor. Elena surged out, rifle barking twice more. Silence fell, broken only by the distant thrum of the core. She reached the bay, sliding into cover behind a console. Marcus and Lena emerged from the lift shaft. Lena leaning on him, her face pale under the helmet light. Blood seeped through the med patch on her thigh, but her eyes burned with focus. "Charges set?" Marcus asked, laying Lena down gently against a bulkhead. "Almost." Elena pulled the detonator pack from her kit, wiring it to the core's exposed nexus. The alien relay pulsed nearby, tendrils weaving through the human wiring like veins. One wrong connection and the whole bay goes up early. Lena coughed, wincing. "Hive's adapting. I can hear it in the static. It's calling more." Elena nodded, soldering the final link. The air thickened with ozone, the nexus flaring in protest. "Then we make sure it chokes on the echo." Marcus hefted his own rifle, scanning the vents. A shadow flickered above, another drone, larger, probing. He fired, clipping its wing. It plummeted, crashing into the console with a screech of tearing metal. The impact jarred the detonator loose. Elena dove, fingers fumbling amid sparks. Too late. The nexus overloaded on its own, a surge ripping through the bay. Lights shattered. Consoles erupted in flames. She grabbed the wire, yanking it taut just as the charge armed. "Evac route!" Marcus yelled, hauling Lena up. They ran, the floor buckling behind them. Elena glanced back, the relay convulsed, tendrils retracting in agony. But the cost hit. Lena's patch tore free, blood trailing in zero-G beads as they hit the airlock. They sealed it just as the core blew, the outpost shuddering like a wounded beast. Debris peppered the hull, alarms wailing into the void. Floating free in the escape pod, Elena watched the station fracture on the view screen. Humanity's trap had snapped shut, but Lena's breaths came shallow, the medkit empty. "We made it," Marcus said, voice rough, binding her wound with torn fabric. Elena's jaw set. Not yet. The pod's thrusters coughed to life, a stuttering pulse that jerked them toward the rendezvous point. Elena gripped the console, her knuckles white against the worn plasteel, eyes locked on the scanner's flickering grid. Lena's wheezes filled the cramped space, each one a ragged pull against the makeshift bandage Marcus had rigged from his sleeve. "She's fading," Marcus muttered, his voice low but steady as he adjusted the compress. He was the cautious one, always calculating angles, but now his hands shook just enough to betray the fear. "We need that med station on the Endurance. 2 hours if we push it." Elena nodded, punching coordinates into the navcomp. The aliens, those sleek tendril-limbed Xenos from the relay, had thought the outpost was their ambush point, a way to bottleneck human supply lines. But humanity had turned it, rigging the core with a feedback loop that fried their neural links. Victory, sure, but Pyrrhic if Lena didn't make it. The void outside stretched endless, stars mocking their fragility. A proximity alert blared, red light strobing across the pod. Elena's heart slammed. "Incoming, 3 signatures, closing fast." She amplified the feed. Angular fighters, their hulls shimmering with adaptive camouflage, the same design that had harried human fringes for months. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, breath hot. "Scouts. They must have pinged the explosion." He strapped in, pulling Lena's limp form closer to the bulkhead. "Evasive pattern delta? No time for fancy." Elena's mind raced, fingers flying. The pod was no warship, just a stripped evac unit with basic ion drives. But humans improvised. She spotted the asteroid belt on the scanner, a jagged debris field from some long-ago collision. "We dive into that rock garden. Use the clutter to mask us." The pod lurched as she fired retros, gravity tugging at their guts. Lena groaned, eyes fluttering open for a split second, then closing again. "Hold on," Elena whispered more to herself. The fighters were gaining, their engines a silent whine on the sensors. Debris loomed, tumbling boulders the size of shuttles. Elena wove through the first gap, the pod scraping hull against stone with a screech that vibrated her teeth. Sparks flew from a glancing hit, but she held course. One fighter overshot, its beam lancing wide and shattering a nearby chunk into shrapnel. The blast wave rocked them, alarms howling. "They're adapting," Marcus said, voice tight. He braced Lena as another jolt hit. "Fanning out." A direct hit grazed the pod's flank, shearing off a solar panel. Power dipped. Lights dimmed to emergency red. Elena smelled ozone, felt the hull groan. Lena's bandage was soaking through now, crimson blooming against the fabric. No time to check. Another fighter looped in, weapons hot. "Override the cargo clamp," Elena barked, the idea sparking from a half-remembered salvage run. Humans didn't fight clean. They fought smart. Jettison the empty fuel cells. Make 'em think we're dumping mass to lighten up. Marcus hesitated a beat, then nodded, punching the release. The clamps blew, spewing inert cells into the void like chaff. The lead fighter veered, sensors confused by the sudden cloud, plowing straight into a spinning rock. Explosion bloomed silent and fierce, fragments pinging off the pod like deadly hail. The other 2 broke off, circling warily. Elena didn't wait. She gunned the thrusters, slingshotting around a massive asteroid. The G-forces pinned them, Lena's head lolling. "Almost there," Elena gritted out, sweat stinging her eyes. But as they cleared the belt, the Endurance appeared on scan, a battered Corvette, human-made grit against the stars. Docking clamps extended, pulling them in with a magnetic thud. Medics swarmed as the hatch cycled, but Elena lingered, watching the remaining fighters retreat into the black. Lena was stable for now. The wound would scar, a reminder etched deep. Marcus clapped Elena's shoulder, his cautious eyes holding a rare spark. "Trap closed. Theirs or ours?" "Ours," she said, the word a quiet vow. The war wasn't over, but they'd bought another day. Elena gripped the briefing room's edge as the holographic display flickered to life, projecting the asteroid field's jagged outline against the Endurance's scarred bulkheads. The air hummed with recycled oxygen, sharp and metallic, carrying the faint tang of solder from recent repairs. Marcus paced behind her, his boots thudding softly on the grated floor, while Lena sat propped in a med chair nearby, her bandaged shoulder rising and falling with shallow breaths. The doctor's nod earlier had been grim, stable, but the shrapnel had nicked something vital. She'd need weeks in region if they had weeks. "Scans confirm it," Elena said, pointing to the glowing red dots swarming the belt's outer rim. 3 Krell squadrons closing in like they own the void. "But they're not hunting blind, they're funneling us toward that nebula." Marcus stopped, his cautious gaze narrowing on the hollow. Nebula's a death trap. Ion storms could fry our shields in minutes. Why push us there unless it's their trap, Lena murmured, her voice hoarse but steady, eyes flicking open wider. She shifted, wincing, but waved off Elena's instinctive reach. Heard the chatter on the comms before blacking out. They think we're limping, desperate, baiting us to run. Elena nodded, her jaw set. The Krell, those chitin-armored bastards with their hive mind tactics, had been picking off human outposts for months, their bioships adapting faster than any alloy hull. But this felt too coordinated, like they'd anticipated the slingshot maneuver through the belt. We turned their ambush, docked clean. They should have scattered. Arrogance, Marcus said, leaning in. His fingers traced a potential vector on the display, rerouting power flows in his mind's eye. Always the planner, he'd jury-rigged half the corvette's defenses during the last skirmish. They believe their numbers win every time. We use that. The ship lurched, a proximity alert blaring as the first Krell fighter skimmed their flank, its organic tendrils probing for weak points. Alarms wailed, red lights pulsing across the room. Elena slammed the console, sealing the hatch. Evasive pattern delta. Thrusters at 80%, don't give them a clean shot. Marcus dropped into the co-pilot seat, hands flying over the controls. Shields holding at 60, but if we dive into the nebula, we're blind. Sensors go haywire in there. Lena forced herself upright, gripping the armrest. Then don't dive. Skim the edge. Use the interference to mask us. Her words came clipped, pain etching lines around her mouth, but her wit sparked through. The same sharp mind that had spotted the initial trap in the belt. Elena met her sister's eyes, a flicker of pride cutting the tension. Risky, one wrong burst and we're ionized scrap. Better than waiting for their net to tighten, Lena shot back. You've got the helm. Make it sing. The Endurance banked hard, engines groaning as Elena punched the thrusters. The viewport filled with the nebula's swirling purples and blues, tendrils of gas coiling like living smoke. Krell signatures multiplied on the scan, herding them closer, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing in eerie unison. A hit rocked the ship, plasma grazing the port side, sparks erupting from a panel. Marcus cursed, rerouting power. Hull breach in auxiliary bay, sealing it now. Elena weaved through the first ion wisps, the controls vibrating under her palms. Static crackled over comms, the Krell's taunting signals distorting into alien hisses. They were close, too close, assuming the humans would panic and plunge in. Not today, Elena muttered. She flipped a manual override, bleeding auxiliary power into the maneuvering jets. The ship shuddered, then surged sideways, clipping the nebula's fringe. Sensors screamed overload, but in that chaos the Endurance vanished from their scopes like a ghost in the storm. The Krell hesitated, their formation fracturing as they scanned empty space. One bioship veered too near, caught in the ion backlash. It bloomed into silent fire, debris scattering like shattered exoskeletons. Got 'em, Marcus said, a rare grin cracking his face. They're turning on each other, can't track without us lighting up. Lena chuckled weakly, slumping back. Human trick. They never see the improv coming. But as the Endurance slipped free, limping toward open space, Elena glanced at the fading nebula. The Krell remnants regrouped, their signatures coalescing into something larger. A mothership, emerging from the gas clouds like a predator from the deep. They'd bought time, not victory. And Lena's wound throbbed in reminder. Every dodge cost them. Elena straightened, plotting the next jump. The trap was theirs to spring wider. Elena gripped the console, her fingers dancing over the holographic display as the Endurance's engines hummed a ragged protest. The mothership loomed on the rear sensors, its tendrils uncoiling like living vines probing the void. Jump in 30, she announced, voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. Marcus, seal the auxiliary vents. Don't want any biosludge leaking in if they fire. Marcus nodded, already halfway down the corridor, his boots clanging against the grated floor. He was the fixer, always had been, the one who turned scrap into salvation with a wrench and a curse. Lena watched him go from her medbay cot, her bandaged side pulling tight with every breath. Tell him to hurry, she muttered, forcing herself upright. That thing's got our scent now. The ship shuddered as the Krell vessel unleashed a barrage, organic missiles that burrowed rather than exploded, seeking hull breaches like parasites. Alarms wailed, red lights pulsing through the bridge. Elena banked hard, the stars smearing into streaks outside the viewport. The nebula's remnants still clung to their shields, a faint ionized haze that might just buy them seconds. 15 to jump. Lena, status on the countermeasures? Deploying now, Lena replied, her voice laced with grit. She punched the release and the forward tube spat out decoys, hacked Krell pods reprogrammed to mimic human signatures. It was Marcus's handiwork from the last skirmish, wiring their biotech against them. The mothership hesitated, its sensors fracturing across the false trails. For a heartbeat the pursuit faltered, but then a tendril lashed out, whipping through the decoys and grazing the Endurance's flank. Metal groaned and a vent seal buckled somewhere below. Breach in engineering! Marcus's shout crackled over the comms, followed by the hiss of escaping air. Elena's stomach twisted. He was down there alone, wrestling the damage while the ship twisted like a wounded animal. Lena staggered to her feet, ignoring the stab in her ribs, and limped toward the access hatch. I'm going, cover me. Elena shot her a look but didn't argue. They all knew the drill. No one sat out when the hull was cracking. Elena fed power to the maneuvering thrusters, a desperate weave through the debris field left by the earlier explosion. Chunks of biometal tumbled past, glinting like broken teeth. The mothership corrected course, its mass eclipsing half the stars, but the jump coordinates locked in. 10 seconds. She could almost taste the warp, the sweet release into slipspace. Lena dropped into the maintenance shaft, the ladder slick with frost from the breach. Marcus was there, braced against a sparking panel, flames licking at his sleeves as he jammed a sealant foam canister into the gash. Almost got it, hold her steady, he barked, not looking up. A secondary hit rocked the ship, the tendrils tip piercing deeper this time, injecting something corrosive that ate through the bulkhead like acid. Lena grabbed a plasma torch from the wall rack, her hands shaking but sure. On 3, pull back. She sliced at the intrusion, the blue arc hissing against the organic invader. It writhed, retracting with a wet snap, but not before spraying ichor that burned her glove. Marcus yanked the panel shut just as the jump klaxon blared. The world folded, stars collapsing into a tunnel of light, and the Endurance hurled forward. Free, but scarred. Alarms quieted to a dull whine. The mothership shrinking to a distant blotch. Elena exhaled, slumping into her chair as the ship stabilized in the new sector. Lena and Marcus emerged from the shaft, faces smeared with grime and blood, supporting each other. We made it, Marcus said, wiping his brow. But that thing's learning. Next time it'll adapt faster. Lena winced, peeling off her ruined glove to reveal blistered skin. The cost etched deeper, another layer of their endurance chipped away. But in the dim bridge light Elena met their eyes, a spark of resolve igniting. They weren't prey yet. Elena gripped the console edge, her knuckles whitening as the Endurance's sensors pinged a faint anomaly ahead. The sector was a graveyard of shattered asteroids, remnants of some ancient collision, but this signal felt too deliberate, like a whisper from the void. Captain, Marcus called from the engineering alcove, his voice steady despite the fresh bandage on his arm. Drives are holding at 70%. We can push if we need to. Lena leaned over the nav display, her blistered hand hovering above the controls. She traced the anomaly with a finger, eyes narrowing. It's not debris. Too symmetric. Like a beacon, but jammed. Elena's mind raced through options. The creature, the adaptive horror they'd barely escaped, had mimicked their signatures before, turning their own tech against them. If this was another lure, charging in blind meant walking into Jaws, but evading it forever? That wasn't survival. That was hiding. Scan for biotraces, she ordered, her tone clipped. Full spectrum. And prep the decoy drone. We launch at low emission, let it draw fire if this goes south. Marcus nodded, fingers flying across his panel. Drone's armed with the echo pulse we rigged. It'll mimic our ion trail for 30 minutes, tops. The ship hummed as the drone deployed, a sleek shadow slipping from the underbelly into the asteroid field. Elena watched the feed. It wove through the rocks, broadcasting a faint distress call, the kind that had fooled patrols back in friendlier space. Seconds stretched. Then the anomaly sharpened, a cluster of dark forms detaching from a larger mass, sleek and predatory, accelerating toward the bait. Got him, Lena murmured, a grim smile tugging her lips. 3 signatures closing fast. Our visitors multiplying. Elena's pulse quickened. The creature wasn't just learning. It was evolving, spawning hunters tailored to their evasion patterns. One had nearly cracked the hull last jump. 3. That could shred them. But the drone held. The forms swarmed it, tendrils lashing out in the feed, probing, tasting the false signal. A burst of static, then the echo pulse fired. A low-frequency wave that scrambled mimicry fields the tech humans had jury-rigged from scavenged alien wrecks. The lead hunter convulsed, its form flickering like a glitching hologram, before erupting in a silent bloom of debris. The others veered, confused, their pursuit fracturing as the pulse rippled through the field. "Windows open," Marcus said, already plotting a slingshot maneuver around the largest asteroid. "We skirt the edge, use the gravity well to mask our exit vector." Elena hit the thrusters. The Endurance surged, G-forces pinning them to their seats as chunks of rock blurred past the viewport. Alarms blared, proximity warnings, but they were clean, the remaining hunters still reeling from the pulse. Lena patched in auxiliary scans. "Bigger mass holding position. It's the nest, I think. Sending out feelers, not committing yet." The ship shuddered through the well, emerging on the far side with momentum carrying them toward open space. Elena allowed a breath, but her eyes stayed locked on the rear sensors. Freedom felt fragile, always one adaptation away from snapping. As the stars stabilized, Marcus slumped back, rubbing his neck. "That pulse bought us time, but it'll adapt to it next. We need something they can't predict, something purely human." Elena met his gaze, the weight of command settling heavier. The nest loomed in their wake, a shadow-growing boulder. They had ingenuity, yes, but the void demanded more. The will to turn trap into triumph no matter the scars. Elena gripped the armrests as the Endeavor hurtled through the debris field, chunks of shattered asteroid pinging off the hull like erratic gunfire. The nest's drones swarmed in their wake, their bioluminescent trails weaving a deadly net across the scanners. "Lena, reroute power to forward shields," she ordered, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Marcus was already at the auxiliary console, fingers flying over improvised code that patched human intuition into the ship's alien-derived systems. "They're herding us toward that gas giant," Lena reported, her cautious eyes flicking between readouts. "Feels like they're setting up an ambush, pulling us into the rings where they can envelop us." She adjusted the thrusters with a precise tap, buying them seconds as a drone skimmed too close, its tendrils scraping the edge of their exhaust plume. Marcus leaned forward, his witty grin fading into grim focus. "Not if we turn their trap inside out. Remember that old Earth mining trick? We vent plasma in a false trail, make them think we're leaking fuel. Then we loop back through the rings using the gravity slingshot, unpredictable as hell to their pattern-matching brains." He didn't wait for approval. His hands blurred, overriding safety protocols to prime the vents. Elena nodded once, brave resolve hardening her features. The plan was risky. Exposing their systems could fry the engines, but sitting prey wasn't an option. "Do it, Lena, plot the slingshot vector. Tighten it. We can't afford margin for error." The ship groaned as Marcus triggered the vent, a brilliant azure streak erupting from their stern, mimicking a catastrophic breach. The drones veered sharply, their collective mass surging toward the lure like moths to a fabricated flame. For a heartbeat, silence reigned in the bridge, broken only by the hum of straining recyclers. Then the first alarm blared. A drone had pierced the deception, its feeler latching onto their actual hull with corrosive precision. "It's adapting faster than we thought," Lena said, her voice tight with caution. She fired countermeasures, but the thing burrowed deeper, sensors lighting up with cascading failures. Life support flickering, oxygen levels dipping. Marcus cursed under his breath, slamming a fist on the console. "That plasma trick bought us half a minute. Now it's learning our scent." He yanked a manual override, rerouting emergency power straight to the docking clamps. In a flash of ingenuity, he deployed them not to secure but to sever. The clamps latched onto the drone's tendril and wrenched, tearing free a chunk of the alien biotech amid sparks and venting gases. The Endeavor lurched free, momentum carrying them into the gas giant's gravitational pull. Elena braced as the rings loomed, icy particles whipping past like a blizzard. "Hold course," she commanded, her mind racing through contingencies. The nest's main body was closing, a colossal shadow blotting out stars. But their slingshot arced them through a narrow gap in the debris, where the drones couldn't follow without shattering. Lena's hands trembled slightly on the controls, but she steadied them, weaving the ship through the maelstrom. "We're gaining separation, 10 clicks and climbing." Yet the cost hit hard. The burrowed damage had compromised the warp coil, readings showing instability that could strand them light years from aid. As they broke free of the rings, slingshot velocity propelling them toward the system's edge, Marcus slumped against his station, wiping sweat from his brow. That was too close. Their adaptations are evolving in real time now. Elena met his eyes, the weight of their narrow escape settling like frost. The nest receded on sensors, thwarted for the moment, but its shadow lingered, a promise of relentless pursuit. They pressed on, the void ahead vast and unforgiving, humanity's grit the only anchor in the dark. Elena gripped the armrests as the ship's alarms blared, red lights pulsing across the bridge like warning beacons in a storm. The warp coil's instability had finally betrayed them, a shudder rippling through the hull that sent loose panels rattling. "Divert auxiliary power to stabilizers," she barked, her voice cutting through the din. Marcus nodded, fingers flying over his console, rerouting energy from non-essentials. Life support dimmed, recyclers whirred to a halt. They couldn't afford another failure. The nest's drones were already pinging their position, faint signatures closing in from the rear. "They're adapting faster than we thought," Marcus said, his cautious tone laced with grit. He glanced at the tactical display, where the alien signatures multiplied like shadows in the void. Elena had always been the bold one, charging into the fray with a pilot's instinct, but Marcus's steady calculations kept them alive. Now, with the coil flickering, even her nerve felt the strain. "If we push the warp jump, we risk a cascade failure. But holding position, that's suicide." She leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the starfield ahead. The system's edge loomed, a gateway to uncharted space, but the nest's influence stretched far. Evolving traps woven into asteroid fields, gravitational anomalies rigged to snag intruders. They weren't just pursuers anymore. The aliens believed they had humans cornered, luring the ship toward a concealed blockade. "We improvise," Elena replied, her wit flashing in the tension. "Scan for microfluctuations in the debris belt. If they're setting a trap, it'll show in the patterns." The scan hummed, data streaming in jagged lines. Dr. Lena Voss, the third on their skeleton crew, hunched over her engineering station in the corner, her brave hands patching what she could with makeshift welds. She'd lost an arm to the first encounter, but her prosthetic whirred relentlessly now, soldering exposed circuits. "Coils holding at 60%, she reported, sweat beading on her forehead. "But the burrowed damage is spreading. It's like the stuff they injected is alive, rewriting the alloys." Marcus cross-checked the readings. Fluctuations confirmed. "There's a dead zone ahead, too perfect to be natural. They're funneling us there." His voice dropped, the weight of command settling heavier since their captain's sacrifice. Elena's plan had been bold. Use the ring slingshot to gain distance, but the cost lingered in every strained bulkhead. Now the aliens' real-time evolution turned their escape into a deadly game. "Alter course 0.4, Elena ordered, thumbs hovering over the controls. The ship banked sharply, thrusters firing in short bursts to skirt the anomaly, but the trap snapped shut faster than anticipated. A swarm of drones erupted from the debris, their forms shifting mid-flight, tendrils extending like living nets. One clipped the port nacelle, sparking against the shields. Alarm screamed louder. "Shields at 70, Marcus shouted, slamming an override to reinforce the forward array. Lena cursed under her breath, rerouting power again, her tools clattering as the deck tilted. Elena weaved them through the onslaught, the viewport alive with darting shadows. A drone latched onto the hull, its burrow-tech drilling in, vibrations humming through the frame. "Get it off!" Elena yelled, but Marcus was already on it, deploying a jury-rigged EMP pulse from the auxiliary bay, a human hack born of desperation. The drone spasmed, peeling away in a burst of plasma, but not before it weakened the coil further. Readings plummeted to 40%. The stakes clawed higher. One more hit and they'd be adrift. Easy prey for the nest reclamation. Lena slammed her fist on the panel, sparks flying. "I can isolate the damage, but it'll take time we don't have." Her eyes met Elena's, the unspoken risk clear. Exposure to the void's cold mercy. Marcus plotted an evasive vector, his mind racing through contingencies. "We turn their trap against them," he said, voice steady. "Use the dead zone's gravity well to sling the drones into each other." Elena grinned fiercely, banking hard. The ship plunged toward the anomaly, drones in pursuit, their coordinated dance fracturing as the pull intensified. Collision alerts blared. 2 drones smashed into each other, debris blooming like fireworks. But the lead one adapted, morphing into a spearhead aimed straight at their core. "Hold on," Elena whispered, punching the thrusters. The impact rocked them, hull groaning, but they cleared the zone, the swarm thinning in the backlash. The coil stabilized at a fragile 20, lights flickering, but they were through, hurtling into the open void. Marcus exhaled, slumping back. That was their endgame. They thought we'd break. Lena patched the breach, her work a testament to unyielding resolve. Elena scanned ahead, the stars sharpening into promise. The nest's shadow receded, but the war for survival pressed on, humanity's fire unquenched. Elena gripped the controls, her knuckles white against the worn plasteel. The void ahead stretched infinite, but the scanners painted a different truth. Dozens of enemy signatures closing fast, their formation a noose tightening around the battered freighter. "They're flanking us," she said, voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. Marcus nodded from the co-pilot's seat, his fingers flying over auxiliary readouts, rerouting power from non-essentials to shields. Lena, wedged in the engineering nook behind them, cursed under her breath as sparks flew from a jury-rigged panel. One more surge like that and we're venting atmosphere. The first volley hit like thunder, kinetic rounds pummeling the hull. Alarms wailed, red lights pulsing across the bridge. Elena banked hard, the ship groaning in protest, stars blurring into streaks. "Evasive pattern Delta, now," Marcus barked, sinking the thrusters with a manual override. They dodged the bulk of it, but a glancing blow sheared off a sensor array, data feeds flickering to static. The enemy ships, sleek angular hunters from the Vixari swarm, pressed closer, their weapons charging with that eerie blue glow. These weren't the drones. These were the real threat. The ones that had glassed colonies and shattered fleets. Lena slammed a conduit shut, her hands smeared with coolant. "Shields at 30%. If we don't improvise, we're done." Marcus glanced at her, then at Elena, the weight of their isolation settling like dust. No reinforcements, no miracle signal, just 3 humans against a hive that thought them prey. He pulled up the cargo manifest, eyes narrowing on the haul they'd scavenged from the nest. Volatile isotopes, unstable but potent. "Elena, plot a course through that debris field." "Lena, can we weaponize the cargo bay vents?" She met his gaze, a spark of understanding igniting. "Overload the magnetic seals. Mix in the isotopes with our exhaust. It'll create a plasma wake, nasty, but it'll fry their sensors." Elena didn't hesitate, punching in the coordinates. The freighter lurched toward the floating graveyard of shattered drones, hulks tumbling in lazy spins. The Vixari followed, arrogant in their pursuit, energy lances slicing the dark. One clipped their flank, fire blooming from a hull breach, but Lena sealed it with a foam patch, buying seconds. "Diverting power," Marcus announced, his voice clipped as he siphoned from life support. The air grew thick, recyclers whining, but the vents hummed to life. Elena wove through the debris, the ship shuddering with each near miss. A jagged fragment scraping paint. Another explosion lighting the viewport. The Vixari closed to point blank, their lead ship unleashing a barrage that lit the void like daylight. "Now!" Elena shouted. Lena triggered the release. The cargo bay erupted in a blazing tail, isotopes igniting in a chain reaction that birthed a storm of superheated plasma. It billowed out, engulfing the pursuers. Vixari hulls ignited, crumpling under the improvised firestorm, debris blooming in silent fireballs. 2 broke free, scarred but closing, their weapons priming for the kill shot. Marcus grabbed the manual turret controls, his shots wild but desperate, chipping away at one. Elena rolled the ship, exposing the underbelly, and Lena rerouted the last of the power into a desperate burst from the maneuvering jets. The damaged Vixari fired, a lance grazing the bridge, shattering a panel in a spray of shards. Elena's arm burned from the heat, but she held course, slamming into the debris wake herself to mask their signature. The remaining hunters faltered, sensors blinded, veering into collision. Explosions chained through their formation, the void clearing in a haze of wreckage. Panting, Elena eased off the thrusters, the freighter limping into the black. Scans showed no pursuits, only echoes fading. Marcus slumped, a cut on his forehead trickling blood. Lena patched the wounds, her hand steady. The cost lingered. Half the cargo gone, systems fried, a scar on Elena's arm that would ache for years. But the stars ahead burned brighter, humanity's path unbroken. They flew on defiant,